so again, we will get your midterm on Tuesday. No, it's already started. Yeah, got your midterm on Tuesday, which is October, what is that? October 10th. Gosh, these weeks just fly by. So again, that's gonna cover chapters 1 through 3. You're gonna be in here during our regular class period, taking the exam. If you don't show up and you don't tell me a good reason for not showing up, you will get a 0. What else? So you're gonna have the whole class period to take it, but if you finish it beforehand, you can go ahead and leave. Closed book, so you can't use the book, but you can use one sheet of notes, as I had mentioned, front and back, and use that as a means of helping you study as well. Writing that stuff down is really helpful. You can also use a sheet of scratch paper. Obviously, you can have a pencil, pen, whatever you need. No cell phone calculators, but you can use the calculator that's on your computer. And if you don't know how to find that, you can just go into the search box and type in calculator, and it will pull it up. Okay, and then you can keep it up. You can even have, I don't know if you're aware, but you can have multiple calculators up. Oops, of course that was on, so you can have multiple, which is kind of handy sometimes. I use that a lot.
So you can't use like a regular calculator?
You can use a regular calculator too.
Okay.
Yeah, just not a cell phone calculator. Is what I ask. Okay, so who do we have wandering in here? Okay. So we'll take that next Tuesday, because the final exam is cumulative. It's going to cover all 6 chapters. I do include in here a day for us to go over the midterm exam together, so you can get a little insight into the problems that you missed, give you a little bit more understanding if there are still any areas in those first 3 chapters that are causing you some issues. What to expect? We will go into a little bit more detail at the end of this class after we talk more about the 941s and finish up chapter 3. But the exam is much more similar to the assessments than to the homework. So I'll have a sigh of relief. I know the homework is extensive. It's a lot of work, a lot of calculations. The exam is true, false. There are calculations, true, false, multiple choice. There are calculations involved, and there are a couple of extra credit problems in there that involve some additional calculations, just to show you, to give you the chance, if you really know your stuff, to show me that you can do those calculations. Those extra credit questions do require you to actually enter in how you arrived at your calculations. So they're not, those are not true, false, or multiple choice. What else do I want to say? Not too much at this point. We can kind of go over, if you have any other specific questions about the exam, we can go over those at the end of class today. But I do want to finish up talking about chapter 3. The last thing that we really need to go over is that 941 form. So we went through, and I just kind of zoomed through. I don't know if there's anything in the slides that I really want to talk about today. I guess I'll pull these out just to have them available. I don't want to do that. All right, so what I'm going to do here is pull up, and I want you guys to do this too. On your computers, pull up a form 941, and you can just search form 941. there should be one. This is the IRS website where you can pull it up and in order to, and it's a fillable form, okay? So we're gonna work through a couple of problems, and we're gonna work through one of the homework problems as well, to show you how this form works. Let me get in here. So here are some practice scenarios I put together, which are available to you to look at as well. Fill all of this in. So here, let me see that a little bit bigger. Okay, so you're a small business owner. You just completed your quarterly payroll calculations. Now it's time to fill out your Form 941 to report your payroll taxes to the IRS. Here's your problem. So using the provided information and IRS guidelines, complete Form 941 for the third quarter of the tax year. Calculate the total tax liability, including federal income tax withholding, Social Security tax, and Medicare tax. Additionally, identify any adjustments, credits, or penalties that may apply based on the given scenario. Now, there aren't really, in this first one, there aren't any adjustments. The second one that we're gonna do, though, should have one of those fractions of cents adjustments, if I did my calculations right when I put this together. Okay, so here we have XYZ Enterprises. There's our employer ID number, easy enough, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So let's fill that in first. And go, please follow along with me. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, because this will be helpful too. So this is, the problem said it was the third quarter, so we'll put an X there in the third quarter. Name is X, what is it? XYZ, is it Enterprises? Where am I here? Enterprises, all right. And we'll enter the address. So 123 Main Street, any town, US of A. Abbreviation, I don't know, US. There's our zip code. All right. So they haven't really, I didn't put down the number of employees. So we have the employees. Total wages. Okay, so let's just say we've got 2 employees. We'll make that part up. So remember, that goes on line 1. Number of employees who received wages, tips, or other compensation for the pay period. And for our purposes, we're looking at quarter 3. So we would look at the pay period for quarter 3 that included September 12th and count how many employees we had during that pay period. We'll say we had 2. It's a small enterprise. Okay, so we'll enter that in there. Now, next line is wages, tips, and other compensation. Total wages paid to employees was $50,000. All right, so that's gonna go here. Federal income tax withheld from those wages. Total federal income tax withheld, $7,000. All right, now we're gonna do some calculations on these amounts. Now there's no information here about any difference between, federal taxable wages or Social Security taxable wages or Medicare taxable wages. So we're just gonna assume they're all the same. But remember, they could be different. It's possible that they could be different. But since it doesn't say anything about that, we're gonna go ahead and just use the 50,000 on our 941 for our total taxable Social Security wages. And then we'll multiply that by the 0.124. 6,200. Remember, this is going to be then the total amount that was that is applies to the employer and the employee portion. All right. Next, we don't have any of these, no tips, although we are going to go through a problem that does have some taxable tips. That's one of your homework problems. And then we're going to look at taxable Medicare wages and tips. Now, it doesn't also say anything about whether or not anybody has exceeded that $200,000 limit during the third quarter. So we can assume that is not the case. All right, if it says it, then unless it says it, assume that that's not the case. Okay, so this 50,000, nobody has exceeded 200,000 for the year, so we won't have any additional Medicare tax withholding. So taxable Medicare wages and tips, 50,000, and again, we're going to multiply that then by the percentage that they've given here. $1,450. All right, we have nothing here. Line 5E asks us to add column 2, here's column 2, from lines 5A through 5D. So all of these amounts is what we're gonna put on 5E. We're not including this yet. We're not including line 3 yet. We will, but not on this line 5E. So 1450 plus 1600, 7650. All right. We don't have any tax due on unreported tip. Total taxes before adjustments. Now we're going to include line 3, and again, like I said, the instructions are right there. Whenever there's a calculation, those instructions are there on the form. So you just read what's not bolded as well, not just what's bolded, but what's not bolded. So add lines 3, 5E, and 5F. Well, 5F is 0, so we're just going to add total up lines 3 and 5E. 650 plus, so 14,650. All right. So at this point, we don't really know if we have any adjustments for fractions of cents. We need to see how much we actually deposited during the quarter. So if we go over here, and these amounts are what was paid. Now, lucky us, it looks like the exact same amount was paid that we just calculated. So we don't have any adjustment for fractions of cents. There's no difference between, there's no rounding adjustment that has to be made in this case. So we don't have anything there, so you don't have to enter anything. Although, I don't know if your program wants you to enter something there. It's entirely possible that there may be lines in there that, even though it's 0, they want you to put 0. So always try that if you're coming up and it's still not quite right. We have no adjustment for sick pay, no adjustments for group term life insurance. So now we're going to combine lines 6 through 9. Well, 14,650. Now, in this case, this particular problem, we don't know what their deposit frequency was, if they were a monthly scheduled depositor or if they were a semi-weekly depositor. I suppose we could assume, if we want to play around with it, we could say that they were a monthly scheduled depositor, because obviously what they owe is more than $2,500, right? So they're going to at least be a monthly scheduled depositor. So we'll play around with that here a little bit. So 14,650, we don't have any credit here, non-refundable. We don't have to do anything else on lines 11. Total taxes after adjustments and non-refundable credits, subtract line 11G, which if we had any non-refundable credits, which we don't cover in this class, but if we had any, they would be totaled up on line G, and they would reduce the amount of tax that's owed. Okay, but we don't have any of that. So subtract line 11G, which is 0, from line 10, which is 14,650. All right, now here, total deposits for this quarter. Now the problem doesn't say what the deposits were, but let's just divide it all by 3, shall we? So 14,650, and we may not come up with an even number here. But this is gonna be the total amount of deposits that were made that includes federal income taxes, Social Security taxes, and Medicare taxes. Let's see if we can divide by 3. Oh, okay, so we're gonna have to round a little bit. So 4,883. And this part, I'm making this up here because the problem didn't have it on there. The total though is 14,650. Now, this is where this amount must equal line 12. So if you have deposited, and it's due to rounding, some amount that's different than what's on line 12, that means that you have to make an adjustment up here for fractions of cents. It means that an adjustment has to be made in order to make sure that line 12 matches what that monthly liability was, or the total quarterly liability was, and what the deposits were. Okay? And we will do a problem that involves that. Okay, so 14,650 and 14,650 is what was deposited. We don't have anything for 13, a lot of reserve for future uses. Total deposits and refundable credits. Now, add lines 13A, C, and E. Oops. We get down to line 14, balance due. If line 12 up here is more than line 13G, which it isn't, enter the difference and see instructions. So that would mean that you didn't pay in enough. There's an additional amount due. Overpayment. If 13G, the amount of deposits, is greater than the amount of liability, then you got a refund that's due. There are a couple of options here. We don't have either one. We zeroed out. There are a couple of options for employers. They can apply any refund to the next return, or they can ask the IRS to send them a refund. So, like if it's $100 or something like that, somewhere along the line there must have been some sort of mistake that was made with those deposits. You could ask for a refund. I will tell you, from an accounting perspective, it is much easier to ask for a refund than to try and apply it to the next quarter, because it just kind of creates a bit of a nightmare, an accounting nightmare, to apply it to the next return. So I always ask them just to send a refund. It's much cleaner and easier on the accounting, on the accountants. Okay, so this section here again, so these would have been the deposits that we made in each of the 3 months. I suppose what we could do, let's do this. Let's say we made $483.33, which would mean that our total deposits were $14,649.99. That means we're going to have to make an adjustment for fractions of cents so that our line 10 and line 12 equals what's here, what our total is here. So if we're at $14,649.99, that means that we're going to make an adjustment of minus 0.1 here. Quarter adjustment for fractions of cents. That will bring this then to 14,649.99. Because that 1 cent is simply a rounding difference, right? So this would also change this 649 and 649. Because we want to make sure that this number here, 14,649.99, is the same as line 12. And it says it right there, total must equal line 12. So this one would also be different. Okay. We don't have to fill out any of this stuff, but here we would have XYZ Enterprises. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's one up here too, yeah. Each page would have this X, Y, Z. Okay. Nothing here, you know. If the employer is allowing somebody else to speak on their behalf, then you could enter this in. Usually that would be the tax preparer, if there was a paid preparer. And then this part 5 again is where the business signs. So president, CEO, partner, some responsible party is gonna sign in that area and include their name, their phone number, and their title. Okay? This is a fairly simple one. Let's do another one. Any questions on that before we go to another one? All right. So let's look at, I think the ID number is the same as the next one. Okay, now you're an accountant working for a small business owner, operates a coffee shop called Mocha Delight. Here's their 941. Nope. EIN goes backwards this time. So let's change this up. So this is Mocha Delight. And 9, 8, 7, 6, 9, whatever. I'm not so concerned about that part. All right, so this is the first quarter of the tax year. So instead of July, we're gonna mark off January. Okay, so the total wages paid to employees was $25,000. And again, we'll say that there were 2 employees. They're not giving us that information, but so now it's $25,000. Income tax withheld, $3,000. So that's gonna go here. So we're gonna do these calculations. 25, this is gonna be 25. So pull up the calculator. 20.124, 3,100. Actually. And it's gonna be half of that, I'm sure. 25 times 0.029, $725. All right, so again, we're gonna total up these two, put it on line 5. 725 plus 3,100. 3825. Total tax, now we're gonna add in that 3,000 of federal income taxes withheld. 6825. Okay, stop here and then let's see what the deposits are. Now, again, I don't have the monthlies on there, but we'll make up amounts. Let me get rid of these. So, now, total employee social security tax that was deposited, these are amounts that are deposited. Total employee Medicare tax that was paid was $724. So I know that we've got a difference here because the calculation was $725, right? But we deposited $724. So our total deposits, 3,000 plus 3,100 plus 724, our total deposits equals 6824. We owe 6825. For the sake of argument, we'll call that a rounding difference, although $1 is a little bit big for a rounding difference, especially when you're just talking about a couple of employees. But we'll just pretend that that's what this is. Okay, so let's go back down and we'll say we're a monthly depositor again. And it was 68, we deposited 6824. Yeah. Divided by 3 months. So 2274.67. All up. Whoops. All right, I do need 267s. So 2274.67 plus 2274.67 plus 2274.66, 68.24. So this total must equal line 12. So line 12 has to be 6824. All right. So we know then we're not going to have anything on line 11. So that means that line 10 is also 6824. So to get from 6825 to 6824, what do we need to do? How much do we need to adjust by? $1, right, up or down? So we're going from 6825, we want it to be 6824, down, right? Like I said, that's a little bit high. That would cause me to say, okay, we probably made a mistake somewhere, but for the sake of argument, we'll just do it that way. So 6824, 6824. Like I said, the more employees you have, the larger that potential difference might be, just because that's how math works. But with only 2 employees, you probably wouldn't expect to see that large a difference. It's only going to be a couple of pennies. Okay, so that's where, and that's how that would look. So this last part here is the voucher if we owed an amount. So let's just say it really should have been $68.25 and we owe them $1. We would fill this out with our employer ID number, 9873321, with our dollar that we're sending in for the first quarter, and then we would enter all the business information there. Okay, that's if we owed money. If we're receiving a refund, we don't have to fill out that voucher. The V stands for voucher. So it's a payment voucher. You'll see that with the IRS, with any type of payment, it's gonna have a form number and then it's gonna have a V at the end. So if you owe money on your individual income taxes, it's a 1040V that you make that payment with. That accompanies your payment. All right, questions? Let's look at one of the homework problems, shall we? I think this was, so the one that I'm looking at, and if you want to pull it up on your own, you can do that, is chapter 3, homework number 45. if you haven't done this one yet, lucky you, get some help with it. All right. We got a lot of numbers to deal with here. This is the third calendar quarter. Bayview Inn, owned by Diane Peters, employed the persons listed below. Also given are the employee's salaries or wages and the amount of tips reported to the owner. The tips were reported by the 10th of each month. Okay, cool. Federal income tax and FICA tax to be withheld from the tips were estimated by the owner and withheld equally over the 13 weekly pay periods. So paid on a weekly basis. This is one quarter. There were 13 pays during this particular quarter. The employer's portion of FICA tax on the tips was estimated as the same amount. All right. So what we've got here, and you do need to like look at the headings on all of these charts so that you're grabbing the correct numbers. Okay. So we have each employee listed separately with, so we've got two individuals who are on annual salaries, and then everybody else is paid by the week. This is for the entire year, and this is a weekly amount and an annual amount, but that's the salary, the general salary. This is how much they made this quarter. Okay, this quarter's wage and this quarter's tips. They've already totaled this for us, which is awfully nice. But we are going to need both of these amounts when we do our calculations. Does this move? Sometimes they do. Quarters OASDI. It's our Social Security. Okay. Quarters health insurance, Medicare, and federal income taxes that were withheld. Now these are the amounts that were withheld. Okay, and these are the totals then for each employee. Now there's additional information down here that we need in order to fill out the 941 form. Tells us how many paydays there were in each of these months. So this is how we get to our 13. Taxes that were withheld for the 13 paydays in the third quarter follow. So $700 a week was withheld from employee paychecks for federal income taxes. Employees' Social Security, employers' Social Security, which are equal. Employees' Medicare and employers' Medicare, which are not equal. So we've already got some difference there that we're gonna have to account for. And then we've got the taxes on tips, employees' portion and employers' portion, and on Medicare, for Social Security and Medicare. Okay, so with this information, we should be able to fill out the 941. Now there's a lot of additional information here. But it tells you lines 5A and 5C, 941, tax on total taxable wages are computed by multiplying the combined tax rate for both employer and employee by the number of payrolls. That there were small differences due to rounding may occur between this total and the total taxes withheld from employees each pay period and the amount of the employer's taxes calculated each pay period. The difference is reported as fractions of cents. So we've got that fractions of cents issue that we're dealing with. If a box does not require an amount, leave it blank. So they're telling you there, if it's a zero, you don't have to enter it in. If required, round your answers to the nearest cent. Use a minus sign to indicate a deduction. Assume that the company deposits taxes on a monthly basis. Okay, so they're a monthly scheduled depositor. All right, and then they give you another hint here. So fill in line form 941 through line 6. So they're telling you, which is what we just did when we were filling this in. Once we got to line 6, we then jumped down to see what the deposits were, right? Because we have to reconcile between those deposits and the liability. Then fill in part 2, line 16, Schedule B. Now we've got a Schedule B. Are they doing, if it's monthly, it's not a Schedule B. Part 2, line 16, part 2, line 6, I guess they're calling this Schedule B. That's a little confusing because there is an actual Schedule B that's a separate form. Should probably say Part B. So we're gonna fill in this part because they're a monthly scheduled depositor. Take that information and fill in line 10. So they're giving you the exact directions what in order to do these in, okay? Fill in line 4 through line 6, then fill in part 2 of the monthly amounts. Take that information, fill in line 10. Note that line 6 and 10 must be equal, okay? It says it has to equal line 12, but because we don't have any credits, our line 10 and our line 12 are always gonna be the same. Okay, because there's nothing that we're going to enter between on line 11, essentially. If the amounts are not the same, correct it by entering an amount to make it equal on line 7. That's our fractions of cents. Line 7 differences are caused by how calculations are made and the amounts withheld from employees' earnings plus the employer's payroll amounts each period. Alrighty, so let's start working on this, shall we? Number of employees, oh, well, first off, what quarter is this? Third? Third quarter, right on. So we need to say that there's our third quarter. They've already filled this in, that's nice of them. Number of employees during the pay period. How many do we have? 10? Thank you. Let's make this just a little bit smaller. Okay, wages, tips, and other compensation. This would be total wages, including the tips and anything else. So we've got that amount here, right? Quarters wages, quarters tips. I'm just gonna add those two together. 115, how much?
53.
Oh, 53?
Yeah,
15.
23.
Okay, 115,000, thank you for doing the math for me. Federal income tax withheld, which we're going to get from here, this column, 9,100. All right. Now, taxable Social Security wages. That is not going to equal this because this includes tips. Tips are going to go on a separate line. Quarters wages, this is how much is going to be for Social Security. 104,975. All right, we'll do the calculations in a minute. Taxable Social Security, we have nothing here and nothing here. Taxable Social Security tips, again, from this column here, 10,07830. Now for Medicare, taxable Medicare wages and tips, we're combining those amounts. We're not separating out the tips from the other wages. Okay, so we're going to combine, so that this line 5 is going to be the same as line 2. We do not have any, they didn't say anything about additional Medicare tax, and besides, we know right up here, so Grant is making $78,000 a year, Joseph is making $52,000 a year. These amounts are not going to get anybody up to $200,000 a year, so we don't have any additional Medicare tax that we have to deal with. And we don't have to worry about reaching that Social Security wage base either, right? Those salary amounts are not enough to get us close to those amounts. So now we do the calculations. So 104, 975 times 124. So 13,01690. This is also multiplied by 12.4%. $1,249.71. Do we have that right?
Yeah.
And then Medicare, take that times the 2.9%. So 330. Did I get that right? That doesn't sound right. 115,053.
3,336.
Yeah, 3,33655. Right? Okay. Now we're gonna add, the next line we're gonna do is line 5E. Total Social Security and Medicare taxes. And again, it tells you right here what to add up. Gives you the instructions. Add column 2, lines 5A, well, all of these amounts, through 5D. Okay? So we're gonna add those together. $17,603.16. All right, we don't have anything in 5F. Line 6, total taxes before adjustments. Add line 3, this one, 5E and 5F. We don't have anything in 5F, so it's just those two. 26,703.16. All right, now remember it said stop when you get to this point. Hold. Then go forward to this section here. They're a monthly scheduled depositor, so we're going to check one, it's B. Normally we just have an X in that box, but okay. You are a monthly scheduled depositor for the entire quarter. Enter your tax liability for each month and total liability for the quarter. Okay, this is where we need to know how many paydays there were in each month. This is showing how much was paid or was withheld during each payday. So we're gonna have to do some calculations here. We've got in July, we've got 5 paydays. During each of those paydays, $700 was withheld for federal income taxes, Social Security and Medicare taxes, Social Security and Medicare taxes. So we need to add all of that up. That's the amount that was of the liability, or the amount that was paid pertaining to that payday, okay? So if we add these all up, so take 700 plus 565 plus 500 plus 11711 plus 11709 plus 4807 plus 4807. So each payday, $2,054.12. These are the taxes that were withheld and then remitted to the IRS. So during July, we had 5. We're going to multiply that by 5. August, 4, and September, 4. All right, 205,412 times 5 is going to be 10,270.60. For the entire month. 205,412 times 4 pays 82,1648. And then in September the same amount, 82,1648. This is our liability for each of those months. That's what we're going to put down here. So all of those up. Oops. 26,703.56. All right. This total must equal line 12. We don't have anything on line 12 yet. Right. You have to go back and look. So 26,703.56. Our liability, however, is 26,703.16. Do I have those amounts right? No? Do I have something wrong?
No, that's
You guys are looking, oh, okay. So, our total taxes, so we're gonna have to make an adjustment here so that our line 10 and 12 equal this amount. Right now, as it stands, our line 10 and 12 are not going to equal this amount. So what do we have to do to go from 26,703.16 to 26,703.56? We have to add 40 cents, right? There we go. 40 cents. We're going to add there. We don't need anything for 8 or 9, but we're going to add then 26,703.16 plus 40 cents, which will get us up to 26,703.56. We don't have anything on line 11, A, B, or C, or D, or E. We don't need anything here. We don't need anything in G. Line 12 is what we have to have another entry on. Total taxes after adjustments and non-refundable credits. These are non-refundable credits. Up here, we don't have any. So, but it tells you subtract line 11G, which is 0, from line 10. So 26,703.56. Total deposits for this quarter. We get this from here, 26,703.56. All right, we got none of these, or we're not gonna fill in any of these. Total deposits and refundable credits, add line 13A through 13F, so 26,703.56. All right, so if there was a difference between line 12 and line 13G, we would have a refund due, or we would have additional tax due. We don't, right? They are equal. The only reason they were different was because of rounding issues. Okay? So we have no balance due, no overpayment, and if you read these, you'll see that that is the case. Let's see, we're not going to enter in anything on here. Let's say, oh, maybe this is no. This would say in the problem up here whether they want that checked or not. Is it no?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And Peters, yada yada. Let's check our work. Okay, so all those amounts are the same, are correct. These. Questions? Several steps to this, but read all of the words. I know we're accountants, we don't like to read words, we like numbers, but we do have to read all of the words. Because one tiny difference in how it's worded is the difference between it being right and wrong. Questions? All right. Should we review for the